Welcome everyone to this GBO meeting. Today we are joined in a hybrid session, both live and on Zoom. Javier Ávila. Welcome. He is a medical doctor. He is an epidemiologist, and he has been in the front line since the very beginning of the COVID pandemic. So he's going to share with us all his experiences and talk about the pandemic in a non yet globalized form. So without any further ado, Javier, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Ignacio. And thank you very much to everyone for inviting me to the association and for coming here today to listen to me. I hope this little talk will help us build some narrative. I'm not intended to give an academic speech here. I'm really trying to engage into a dialogue with you all, both my assistants here and the many people who are watching out from other countries. So I want to give a different perspective of this pandemic that steps out from the purely epidemiological talk that usually you can hear. And we will go through some historical steps, and we will build what happened from the 18th to today. And we will get a historical review. But first of all, my name is Javier Ávila. I'm a medical doctor. I'm a resident doctor, currently specializing in preventive medicine and public health. It's how medical doctors in Spain become epidemiologists. And I'm doing my doctoral studies in Autonomous University of Madrid, where I study pandemics and other complex public health issues from a complexity and mathematical point of view. So that's what I'm trying to bring today, both in a more colloquial way. So first of all, epidemiologists have become really famous these times, but do we really know what epidemiology is about? Well, if we check a formal definition given by American CDC, we see that epidemiology is the study, which means that it's something scientific, systematic, data-driven, and it's the study of the distribution and determinants of health events, not only diseases. So a pandemic is both a disease and an event which trigger really social, political, and economic situations, and we study that as well. And we do it not from the individual point of view as any other medical doctor or healthcare providers do, but we do it from the population perspective, which means that we can study neighbors, cities, countries, or even the whole world. So we are a population scientists, even in that way. We do not only study this phenomena, we also try to apply this knowledge to the control of these problems. So bear that in mind, and let's step back in time. Let's tell a little tale about how epidemiology of infectious diseases was born. And we need to go to London, 1854. This man here, you might have known here because he's very famous, is John Snow, not the one from Game of Thrones, I'm afraid, but the founding father of modern epidemiology. He was a medical doctor, scientist in London, who was really concerned about cholera outbreaks taking place alongside the years. So this map is probably one of the most famous in epidemiology because one of the first spatial studies of distribution of disease. So just notice that cholera cases were accumulated around certain places in London. We are speaking of a time in which cholera was an unknown disease. They didn't know what caused cholera or how it was transmitted. So they were just speculated things. So he noticed that the cases accumulated alongside a water pump in a time in which they didn't even know microbes existed. But before speaking of this map, we need to talk about what was happening in London. And with London, we are going to jump into the world in today, and you will get why. Before 1854, there were another cholera outbreaks. We're going to jump to 1848. In that time, John Snow was studying cholera. So he noticed that most of the cases were clustered around the southern districts of London. And he noticed if cholera is a gastrointestinal disease, so he thought that maybe ingesting or drinking something had something to do with this transmission in a time where the scientific knowledge stated that disease is transmitted through miasmas. Miasmas or toxic clouds with morbid properties that people inhaled and became ill. So we didn't know anything about modern microbiology. But he thought, well, if we inhale something, we will have a lung disease, not a gastrointestinal disease. So he proposed a transmission mechanism through which people drank water which was contaminated with something, we didn't know that it was contaminated, and people will acquire the infection that way. When he proposed his theory, he was met with laughter, critics, and a complete refusal from the scientific community at that time. So he was like mocked out of the modern debates. He was not believed. And he stated that the waters that were took from river pharmacies when passing the city, which were pretty contaminated as they are today, were the cause of the cholera outbreaks. Because in other parts of the city where the water was taken from upstream water or outside the city, cases were much lower. So he didn't have a way to prove it. So in 1853, what happened? Two companies that provided water to the southern districts, one of those companies moved away and started taking the water from different places. What John Snow observed then is what the houses that drank water from the second company that had moved away saw a tremendous reduction in cholera cases. Meanwhile, the houses that drank the water of the first company, they were still suffering from cholera outbreaks. So in 1854, when another especially crude outbreak happened, he proposed to the authorities that the water pump had to be closed. This was the pump that we can see in the center. He proposed that it was the source of the infection. And guess what happened? The epidemic was somehow controlled. Cases faced a reduction, but the outbreak didn't finish. So people were really angry because they only could take water from that pump, and now we're closed. They had to move away for a way to take water they needed for the day. Company was also really angry, and because he was suffering from public discourse. The company thought that we are in a time in which microbes were not covered. So a doctor comes in and say, okay, you have to shut your business down. And they don't know why, and they don't really do nothing. So the authorities finally didn't believe John Snow. They reopened the pump, the cases started to grow again, and nothing else happens. John Snow will die a couple of years later without seeing his theory confirmed. But 20 years later, in another outbreak, 10 years later, in another outbreak, his theories were confirmed, and when the water source was cut down, the epidemic vanished. 10 years later, Louis Pasteur will discover microbes, and Robert Koch will communicate to the world the discovery of the Vibrio cholerae, the microbe responsible from cholera. So, So that's anything from this story we can develop in the audience. So we have a known disease, and we have public distrust in the measures taken by authorities that didn't really believe what Nobel scientists was saying. Public rates and corporation pressure to preserve their image, they were all putting a pressure in not doing what had to be done. So we have a lot of uncertainties going on here. This happened 150 years ago, but somehow echoes today. From there, we have to make a time travel. We're going to go to the 2000 years. However, I'm just going to mention one thing that happened among many things that have happened in 100 years, obviously. And it's what we epidemiologists call the epidemiological transition. What means that? It means that we went went from a time in which infectious diseases were the main cause of mortality and morbidity, so tuberculosis, cholera, Libra, fevers, they were a real cause of death. So public health and science fought against that. We developed antibiotics, we developed vaccines, and we developed public health and hygiene. And we won that fight. And we kind of eradicated infectious diseases as the main cause of death in Western and developed countries. And instead of these infectious diseases, other like cancers, heart conditions, lung condition, chronic and debilitating conditions took over the place and were now the main focus of research, of medical advances, and immunology, of course. So we forgot about infectious diseases. And this is somehow true. And we thought we were safe then. So infectious diseases is something that was happening in other parts of the world, not in our country. And it's somehow true. I mean, if we take a look at this table, we see that from the cholera pandemics and the Spanish influenza of 1988 up to modern times, we haven't had any real huge pandemic. We can speak about the AIDS pandemic taking place in the early 80s, which is very quickly took over the world. But well, it has its specific characteristics, like novel virus quickly disseminates through the globe and reaches barely the whole population. But even though it was just an exist, it hadn't changed the way we perceive infectious diseases. Here we can see a map of all the current infectious threats that the world faces now. Novel virus, emerging pathogens that were thought to be controlled but are now re-emerging. So we have not finished the work with fighting infectious diseases. And then 2003 came, and this is a very important year to understand what's going on today. So in 2003, a novel virus emerged in China, the province of Guangdong, and was called SARS-1. It was the first coronavirus, a severe acute respiratory syndrome. It began about November 2002, and by April 2003, the virus has expanded throughout the world because China hadn't advised international authorities. And we can see that how in a couple of months, 5 months, pandemic took place, it reaches the Americas, we know the precision. It reaches all southeast of Asia. And finally, some important cases were found in Europe. Fortunately, the pandemic just vanished itself. We don't know why. The virus was relatively easy to control compared to the second coronavirus and didn't have all the transmissibility needed to perdure, and it vanished. And we haven't had any single case of SARS-1 since then. It just vanished. But it rang a bell in the international community. But something else was happening in 2003. Again, in Southeast of Asia, when the flu season began that year, they found out a new strain of influenza virus, avian influenza. Maybe you've heard about that, H5N1. It was a strain that was first detected 5 years ago, 1997, in Hong Kong, when a virus that was thought to only circulate through water in birds spilled over and infected one person in Hong Kong. 1997, nothing else happened until 2003, when 70 cases are detected in all the Southeast of Asia. By 2005, this influenza strain had developed and had disseminated throughout the world again. It was the second pandemic in barely 4 years. So something was happening, and the international community noticed. So a reaction was noticed, and the United Nations system asked WHO to revise and adapt the international health regulation that had been placed from 50 years ago. International health regulations act as an international treaty which binds all the signing countries to take measures to prevent the international and cross-border dissemination of infectious diseases and other threats that could alter both human health and this is very interesting, international traffic and trade. So we are seeing a conjunction here where human health is not only the main goal, but also to protect global international trade, because we are in an emerging area of globalization, so it had to be protected. And they also created the figure of the public health emergency of international concern, which has also been very famous recently because of COVID. So it is an international effort. 196 countries, all the countries in the world, signed this agreement, which was legally binding, which means all these countries have the legal obligation to adapt their national laws to address the international health regulations. And what happened? Well, the international world responded, and a whole pack of institutions started to be created. So we had in Europe, European Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. We had China CDC, Taiwan CDC, American CDC, which were already going with the global health agenda. Also created specific agencies, global health security agenda, governments around the world, academic institutions. And especially remarkable is the emergence of a term, a concept, of a framework, which is called One Health. So One Health, it's a term that has been going around in veterinary medicine for almost 200 years. It's not that new. So what does veterinary medicine has to tell us about all this? Well, One Health means that the health of the human beings, the health of the animal world, the health of the ecosystems, they all form part of the same system and they cannot be addressed separately. Because what happens in the animal world affects the human world. For example, antibiotic resistance it's very related to the human world. Also to the ecological world, climate change, ecosystems alteration, pressure of interspecies fight, they all link together. And we will go through this later. Now, with all this going on, all the international effort being put in place, we reached 2009 and we faced another global pandemic of influenza. This time, I'm sure you all remember, because it was the swine flu influenza pandemic. And what was so frightening about this strain, H1N1? It was the same virus that caused the 1988 Spanish influenza pandemic. So everyone was pretty much in panic because that pandemic was really devastating for the world with thousands of hundreds of million deaths. And people thought that if that scenario was to take place again, it could be devastating for the world. So with the international health regulations, with the new agencies, with all the previous preparation that had been done, we tried to stop this pandemic, and we failed. But why? Not really because we were not prepared, but because the virus itself vanished. It was a really low mortality strain, so it had a very high transmissibility. It was very easy for it to be transmitted between persons, but it didn't really cause that much mortality as it was expected. So all the efforts put in place by the countries of vaccine stockpiling, antiviral stockpiling, preventive measures, NPIs, they were for nothing because the virus was not that dangerous, even though it was estimated to reach about 20% of the global population. But it backfired somehow. So because all the preparations that had been made were for nothing, millions of dollars spent, and measure additional plans, in the end they were for nothing. So people started questioning if the health security, pandemic preparedness was really something that we needed right now, and we needed to invest in that. As a result, WHO saw a budget cut, especially when it comes to health preparedness and pandemic preparedness. We have a time of austerity, we have the financial crisis well going on. And you know that pandemic is really close to problem to go through. So we see that the first three pandemics of the decade, SARS, avian influenza, and Sindemic group, they all cost around 50 billion US dollar. Which is not only direct costs, but also indirect costs from loss of productivity, lockdowns, and money spent in preventive measure. So it's really hard for the economy until now. Not only that, but this was unevenly shared around the world. So the most vulnerable countries were as well the most vulnerable from the economic point of view, of course, were the most vulnerable to the effects of the pandemic. So Western countries will face a pandemic and their economies will not be that damaged. But economies who were already struggling would suffer most. We can see, for example, in Sierra Leone with the 2014 pandemic of Ebola, the economic cost that it has to suffer is huge. $33 billion in losses. Half the population lost the war. Tourism hub as well. So it's a huge strike against any economy in the world. So we were facing new problems that hadn't been around for a century. So modern problems don't really require modern solutions. Let's see what we know about that. We jump to 2019. We have gone through more pandemic. We faced Ebola. We faced Zika. We faced chikungunya. We have faced several situations that have taught us that we are not prepared to face a pandemic. So they set up a working group, the Global Preparedness Monitoring Board, which is composed of both WHO, the World Health Organization, and the World Bank. And they made a report called A World at Risk. What does this report say? Well, it's a number of recommendations aimed to national governments, international financing institutions, United Nations systems, and they say begin to prepare, develop your system, develop a strong healthcare system, develop public health system for surveillance, prevention, and control. International agencies finance this preparedness because it's cheaper than facing a pandemic. United Nations strengthen cooperation in the international field. And above all, they say prepare for the worst. 2019, please remember, a year before coronavirus. What is the worst? Rapidly spreading, lethal, respiratory pathogen pandemic. Pathogens that spread via respiratory droplets that can infect a large number of people very quickly. And with today's transportation infrastructure, not rapidly across multiple geographies. They were warning us about something like COVID. So the world was warned, but was not prepared, obviously. So this is 2019. If we jump to 2020, we find a very different report, a world in disorder. So COVID had already struck the global economies, the global health, had already caused thousands, hundreds of thousands of deaths around the countries. So now recommendations were not about preparedness, but were about resilience and governance of the global system. So now we have to face a global pandemic that has struck the whole world. And we need to govern the response to that pandemic. And this is where all the little pieces that I've been talking about are starting to be brought together. So up to now, I've been speaking about pandemics, about epidemiology, about diseases, about numbers. Now we are going to broaden our perspective. We are going to start to break up the economic, the governance, and the international system that conforms our global structure of today. So the effects of COVID are notorious. We can see the decrease in per capita GDP growth is much larger than global financial crisis in 2008 or the Asian financial crisis. Coronavirus has already struck our economies, causing almost 20 trillion US dollar in losses. Already, losses that have already happened and the ones that will take place in the near future. Not only that, COVID has already affected how our democracies, our human rights, our social development is taking place. You can see that the whole world has suffered a decrease in their democratic conditions. And the other structure of future generations education has also been greatly affected because of lockdown and distance education. So 2 billion students worldwide has suffered a loss of conditions regarding education. So this is a huge strike, not only to the present, but also to the immediate future. So we face global risks, but how do we tackle this global risk without a proper global structure? Well, we want to ask the World Economic Forum that also makes a yearly report of global risks and the drivers, of course. So 2018 was again, we step back before COVID. What were the most perceived risks in terms of likelihood and impact? Climate change related events. So extreme weather, natural disaster, failure of climate change mitigation, and in terms of impact, quick consumer interactions, extreme weather events, and just at the bottom of the list, we have the spread of infectious diseases. It was not perceived as a global risk at all. It's very low value. But once again, we're in 2021 and COVID has happened, and now infectious diseases is the top risk perceived in terms of impact, altogether with climate change related events. And that is really interesting. It's and this is what I want to bring my speech. Up to now, we've been speaking of isolated events and risk. There are pandemics, we have climate change, we have democratic disorders, human rights violations, and we've been thinking all this time that these are isolated events. They are not. They are all interconnected. In fact, climate change is one of the main drivers of pandemics, because when the ecosystem is put into pressure, when the social-ecological conditions merge together to form an ecological niche in which new pathogens can emerge, can interact with humans, giving rise to the chance of new mutations that makes a previously non-human infected virus to spread through humans. And they are all interconnected and they should not be tackled alone. This is what is called the complexity approach. The system theory, which was proposed in the 50s by various academics from the world of informatics, biology, of mathematics, and to my studies, and to my opinion, it's what we exactly need right now to tackle the complexity of all the phenomena that are going on right now. So here we can see how different risks and different drivers of those risks are all interconnected and linked together. So we cannot just take one of these strings and say, okay, let's fix it so we can fix the problem. It's impossible. They are all connected. If we cut one of these ties, the rest will still be making effect. So this will not be effective at all. The Lancet and the academic community has been studying all these links for years. So we have this report from 2018 in which climate change is clearly pointed out as the main threat to human health and human societies. And we can see how all these effects connect to each other. So how the rising sea temperature and extreme weather events end up leading to human diseases, to social disturbance, and with the rise of emerging pathogens or vectors of disease. In the same article, and the title of this conversation, I was going to talk about syndemics, about multiple ongoing pandemics. This is a good example. So we have a pandemic of obesity going on in Western countries. We have a pandemic of undernutrition going on in the other half of the world. And we have climate change. And they all live together. And they are pandemics. Why? Because they affect the whole world. Because we cannot tackle one problem in one country without addressing a different problem in a different country, which is related. So this is a syndemic. It's multiple pandemics of different nature taking place at the same time all over the world. And against that, nowadays we have a very weak structure because we are talking about health risk, economic risk, and governance risk. We are talking about too many things at the same time. I can understand that it's something struggling. So when it comes to health governance, only health governance, take a look at the enormous amount of actors and issues that need to be addressed. It's a puzzle that we have not still solved. But what is true is that the answers need to be political, not only technical. We've been speaking for too much time about the politics nature of the problems of the world, and we have not been speaking about the politic nature of the answers and solutions to these problems. So here you can see a very small graphic of a network of stakeholders, institutions, actors, which say the global response to health emergencies and pandemics. Can you see how to govern all these huge amount of factors? It's almost impossible. How do you bring them together to work in the same direction, with the same ideas, with the same objectives? It's really complicated. And that's why during the last recent years, a new field has emerged. And this is global health diplomacy. This is the intersection between international relations, diplomacy, and global public health. So now, when countries sit and start to negotiate treaties and trade agreements, health is on the table. The health issues, vaccines, international cooperation, international epidemiological surveillance networks, they are all brought together and are now a matter of fact, an important issue in global international relationships. But public health is not yet there. I mean, myself as a public health professional in making, I have no clue about international relations. I have no clue about what determines and what causes an international treaty to take care of third countries when two countries are negotiating. It's difficult, and the experts in these fields, economists, diplomats, and political scientists, don't really have a lot of knowledge about health as well. So it's need to be brought together, and that is what some actors around the world are trying to build. Global health diplomacy, and it's an emerging field, so we have very few literature, very few articles, very few experts. So we are going to see how this is shaped during the following years, even with COVID, which is giving rise to this field. And to end this little talk, I want to bring a fact here. Politics are also part, or the main part, of the solution. So a couple of days ago, a United Nations Special Rapporteur of Poverty visited the UK, and he had the mission of addressing the poverty that was threatening the UK, extreme poverty, and the loss of future of generations. His conclusions were devastating, and it's really striking. So poverty is a political choice. The United Kingdom has enough resources to rescue all its population from poverty, all its population of poverty, but it's not doing so because of politics, because they have decided not to do so because of reasons. But if politics were aligned with the ideas of progress, of ending poverty, and a better future, they have resources to do so. So global health, in terms of public health, in terms of epidemiology, in terms of political economy, in terms of global governance, is of political nature. And if politics are the issues, politics must be the solution as well. That's something that was said 100 years ago in Germany by other of the great founders of public health, Virchow. If social are the problems, social needs to be the solution, because he wanted to eradicate one disease that was spread in the region of Silesia. And the recommendations that he gave after visiting the region, they were like, if you want to end this outbreak, bring democracy to these people. If social are the problem, so must be the solution. And with this idea, I hope we can start a dialogue. And I'm really happy to answer your question, to engage in the conversation. And I hope that I have brought a different perspective to what we have seen during this pandemic year. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Javier. I open now the questions and answers to everyone in Zoom too. So you just need to unmute yourself and ask, and we will also ask questions from here. So let me start, Javier, if I may. Do you think that we are ready for another pandemic that may come a couple of years once this is completely over?
Now, I think that we are definitely not ready for anything like COVID. So we've seen that our systems are extremely weak in terms of preparedness and in terms of social response. So we are facing with a number of conjunctive problems, such as public distrust in the government, public distrust in scientific measures. We have scientific issues as well. We have some epistemic problems here. For example, we are struggling to demonstrate through scientific studies that non-pharmaceutical measures such as confinement, mass use, can really reduce the number of cases that are transmitted. We are really struggling to prove that, and we are really struggling to communicate to the public the scientific knowledge behind all the measures that are being taken. So this is really hard. And so we see how nationalism it's like another virus. So if a powerful country decides that he's not going to cooperate, that he's not going to take part of the international response, as we saw, for example, in the States with the Trump presidency. So it was a nationalist approach. He decided that he had to do nothing. He decided that he was not going to listen to science, and he let their own people die because of the virus. We see Bolsonaro. We see many examples around the world. So there are no international structures of governance that are able to bring these answers together.
Questions?
Another question. What is the solution behind that? How can we put all the government together? Because the solution of the diagnosis is very clear, but the solution doesn't seem to be so easy. I mean, at the end, putting people around a table and to agree on doing the things that you're talking about sounds a bit at least complex, I would say, no?
Yeah. The answer, in my opinion, is as clear as difficult. It's improving international governance. So we need the United Nations system to be strengthened, to be given executive power, to be given competencies that are now into the national states. We need to step further into the globalization. So we have economic globalization, we have mobility, globalization, have trade globalization, international relations, but we lack something like an international government. And I think that this is the step that needs to be addressed. And it's very, very complex. It's not easy. The history proves that no nation has conceived power to supranational structure without a powerful reason. Maybe COVID is that reason. I'm not that sure. And we could speak about now nuclear shock doctrine, for example, and we could speak as like if COVID was that shock. And now governments are more prone to concede that power. But we see it with time. It will take time, definitely. It's not easy, it's not going to happen in the following years, but I'm sure that in 10, 20 years, we will be seeing some international government structures.
What is your take on the current situation? In what stage of the current pandemic are we now? And what can we expect in the following months?
I think that we are in the state in which we need to assume that contrary to what happened in the previous pandemic, COVID, it's not going to fade. It has come to stay with us to become an endemic disease, which is going to currently be circulating among humans, unless we are able to stop its circulation with vaccines, which is the same that it's trying to be made with polio and the same we made with other diseases, with a huge international effort. But we need to be mentally prepared for that, because that can imply that measures such as confinement, mask use, non-pharmaceutical measures, maybe they could be with us longer than we decided. And we need to tackle another issue here, and this is the equity in vaccine development. So let me be all straight and give an example. Now, the variants that we are dealing, the British variant, South African variant, Brazilian variant, if you take a closer look at the names of the countries where they emerged, they are countries in which circulation was especially high. In the United Kingdom during this autumn, South Africa right now, Brazil right now because of Bolsonaro. So the more the virus can circulate, the more chances are for a mutation to take place. So what happens if now Western countries stockpile the vaccines and only focus on vaccinating its own population? We leave South Africa and we leave Brazil unvaccinated. So we are giving the virus the chance to mutate, and that mutation can lead to a variant that can run over vaccines, that can invade the vaccine protection. So imagine that we have in Spain, 90% of our population vaccinated, which would be very good news. We have 90% of our population vaccinated, and now people from someone from South Africa comes here, and because there has been a variant that has mutated and can evade the vaccination, it reaches Spain and it causes a small outbreak, and this outbreak leads to another epidemic. And we have our population vaccinated, but an outbreak can still occur. So that's why it's so important to address the vaccination issue from a global equity perspective. It's not only a matter of solidarity. It's not only a matter of international cooperation. It's a matter of our own safety. If we were to be selfish, okay, let us be a selfish country, selfish people. Okay, it's human nature. We need to vaccinate all Africa, all Latin America, all Asia. We need everyone vaccinated as soon as possible, not only our own country. The risk of not doing so is being stuck in a loop of continuous effects. And that needs a complexity approach, a systems approach. Understand that issues taking place, different issues taking place in different places are all linked together. It's like the butterfly effect. We never know what the butterfly effect in South Africa can make to ourselves here in Spain or in any other country of the world.
Any questions from the Zoom?
Yeah, I have a question. And you're talking about actually one of my questions. You answered a little bit in your last statement, but as far as herd immunity, we've been listening to a lot of governments talking about reaching 70%, for example, population vaccination with herd immunity. Do you think this will protect populations even if there is a different variant of the virus in the future? Or will we have to always develop new vaccines for the new different strains of the virus?
Well, it's a very interesting question because it's allowed me to address two different issues. In one hand, herd immunity is really difficult to reach in COVID. And I'll tell you why. Not only because of the number of vaccines developed and used, but because people refuse to get vaccinated. So there is a vaccine refusal, which in Spain it's not really strong. I think it's not a problem. But in other countries like the States, it's really a huge problem. We're talking about a 30% of the population that will not vaccinate, even if they have the chance. And we can't really force people to get vaccinated. Or by doing so, we will see more like a different kind of state and society that we aim to. So even if we have the resources needed, if people refuse to get vaccinated, if people refuse to address measures, we are going to always be vulnerable to a new strain coming in. And in the other hand, we have what I told before. There are always going to be new strains going on, so that is going to force us to be in continuous surveillance, to be continuously developing new vaccines, looking for the universal vaccine, which is very unlikely to happen because of the experience we have with previous diseases, even especially with a highly mutated virus like this one. So it's going that's why I said that it's going to be a challenge for the next following years, because we're not assuming that COVID-19 has come to stay with us. And the idea of eradicating it, even though it's possible, because the possibility exists, it's really difficult to reach. It's really hard. It needs an international cooperation level that I'm not sure that can take place right now. But it can as well be the driver of the society of international improvement of relation. We can see a rise of new different ways of addressing public health, of addressing international trade with the needs that COVID, the pressure that COVID has put on us. But it's going to be the challenge of the following years, and I think that we're going to be facing outbreaks of COVID-19 for a number of years, I'm afraid.
I actually have another question based on what you just said, because in the beginning of the presentation, you touched a little bit about the historical pandemics that we've faced, and has there been in history a pandemic that has had such different changes in strains that were difficult to control? Is there some historical relevance that we can learn from in this case?
Thank you very much for that question, because it's an amazing topic for me. So from the historical—
Sorry, Miguel, could you come closer to the microphone? Because I'm listening very bad. It is possible? I listen to you like far away. Maybe try.
Is better?
Yes, much better. Thank you.
You're welcome. So from the historical point of view, we lack the comparative framework needed to answer that question. Because when pandemics happened in the past, we lack the resources that we lack now. We lack science, we lack vaccines, we lack antibiotics, we lack international relations, we lack the United Nations system. So pandemics were just local problems that affected concrete nations or concrete cities. I'm going to get back to this. here. This table is taken from an article, from a very recent article published by Anthony Fauci, which is the head epidemiologist of the United States, and I'm sure you're aware. And we have a very historical perspective in the first world, which can be traced back to plague, different plague pandemics that killed and murdered population in the past. But it's not only about the number of deaths, it's about the changes that pandemics brought. So for example, when we talk about the Black Death, the plague in Europe in the Middle Ages, little is known that apart from banishing 1/3 of the European population, it gave rise to modern, it accelerated like the end of the antique regime. So you can imagine France, a country full of farmers and lords in their castles, and now the farmers have died. They don't have people to fight in their armies. They don't have people to grow their fields. So they need to make concessions for people to remain in their territory. So what are those concessions, those improvements? And they see themselves freed as a slave, and they are getting paid for their job. They are no longer servants, and this is the seed of what will be the future liberal states. When, on the other hand, in the Eastern Europe, a very different process took place, which made the feudal system last a lot longer, for a couple of centuries more. So pandemics have a huge impact in societies, and they have always been like this throughout history. I could speak as well about the arrival of Spanish people to America and the rise of the so-called globalized, which is the disease that killed about 90% of the population. It was a local disease. It was not a disease brought by the Spanish people, as is it commonly known. However, even though the Spanish people didn't bring that disease, they created the social, economical conditions of poverty, of misery that was needed for that disease to burst and to kill 90%, 70 to 90% of the local population of Mexico. But that disease was the globalized, not the Spanish flu or other virus. So the history of epidemics is a really wonderful and rich world to study because of the lessons that we can get. But unfortunately, the world we live today is far too different from all those cases. So we lack the comparison framework. And I can't really tell you how swine flu, how the AIDS pandemics, and how COVID are going to affect our societies compared with the past. So we need to learn from the current experience and from the ongoing events. Any more questions?
One question for me.
Yeah.
Do you think that, hypothetically, if we stopped every human activity, so to speak, for 20, 30 days worldwide, this could end the pandemic? Or would the virus somehow survive? I don't know how.
I think the virus will survive that. It will get damaged. Transmission will really be reduced. But we need to remember that during the first wave in the world the previous year, we needed to be locked down for 3 months for the transmission to be completely detained. It's not that easy. Nor human nature is to obey order of such magnitude. If you ask anyone to remain home for a month, maybe in Spain with there's no enforcement by the law, by police, army, okay, we could try something like that. But do you think that we can achieve that in other countries of the world? No, it's impossible. And we've seen how mobility networks are really connected. So what you achieve in one country can be undermined by what it's happening in another country. And it's impossible to stop those flushes. Because if we stop mobility flows, we will be stopping trade flows. No one wants that because the economy, the capitalist economy, which relies in the ongoing, in the continuum of the economy, it will collapse completely. So our economy is not ready for something like that, and so it means that we are not ready to take measures like that.
I have another question. In your opinion, in the beginning of COVID, we saw different countries reacting differently with their regulations. So, for example, Sweden just really allowed everything to continue with their citizens just being asked to be more careful, whereas we saw complete lockdowns in places like Spain for many, many days. And in the end, maybe the results are not very different. But what is your opinion in this case, based on these types of examples of different countries with different regulations? In your opinion, what is the best way to try to control a virus like this?
Well, that's again a very relevant question. And it brings again the issue of complexity. So when it comes to controlling any infectious disease, from the mathematical point of view, I'm going to be really, really quick and simple in this. When we want to measure how transmission happens from one person to another person, we need, in the first place, an infected person. We need a susceptible person, which can get the disease. We need those persons to be meeting each other because it's person-to-person transmission. And we need that probability, I mean, the ability of the virus to be transmitted effectively. So these are 4 parameters. And it is really different to consider how Spanish people behave in terms of socializing with other people, how Swedish people, Finnish people, German people, Chinese people, how they socialize, how close they get, how frequently they get together, what are the social norms surrounding Spanish Latin people. We are really commonly in person. We love to touch each other, to give hands, to give hugs. I don't see a Finnish person doing so. So there are a lot of factors going on. And apart from the social factor, we have the scientific and epistemic factors. So we don't have an answer to that. We don't really know if putting in place more restrictions is better than being less restrictive. We don't have an evidence for saying this is better, this is worse, or vice versa. We simply don't. We just can put measures in place, see the results, and compare, which is something really not scientific. Because there are many factors acting differently in different countries. So if I were to believe that the Sweden approach was better than the French approach, I would leave French open. And maybe in France, that would mean a lot more people becoming ill or becoming infected. Meanwhile, in Sweden, that would not happen. Maybe, we don't really know. And we cannot make this kind of natural experiments. We cannot expose our population to the virus to see what happens. So this is again one of the factors that affect complexity when responding to the virus. We don't have a menu of measures that can be put in place. And if I do that, I will reduce the virus spread by 10%. If I do that, combined with that, 20% will be reduced. We don't have that kind of knowledge, and we are struggling to be able to do so. And that are the epistemic issues and problems that I have told and that we're facing. Right.
Any more questions? Oh, thank you very much, Javier.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for staying here, for listening, for your questions, for the dialogue. And I hope it has really been of use for you, and it's really helps you bring another different view and to think about it in the future.
Thank you very much. Very much. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.